comes to mind when you hear these words from Scripture? Come out of her, my people. There are various explanations concerning this command. It is a warning to the people of the Most High to come out of the pagan religious system that began in Babylon. Today, that system is being controlled by the Roman Catholic Church, representing the legs of iron as prophesied by the prophet Daniel. It's the beast system that controls the religions, governments, and financial systems of the world. Interestingly, all of the major religions of the world can be traced back to Babylon. But there is one that serves as the major religion of the world: Christianity. In this session, I want to examine the religion we call Christianity, but from a different perspective, because there are many who are waking up to the truth and having a hard time understanding why some Hebrews or Hebrew Israelites are opposed to being called a Christian. And I think some may have a hard time because they think people are trying to get them to doubt their salvation or nullify the relationship they had with the Most High before they learned about their true identity. So they just don't want to go there. But my question for you is, do you really know what it means to be a Christian? Initially, I struggled with this as well. So today, I want to go there. I believe really that this information will help you. I also just want to pause for just a minute to say thank you to all of you who have been letting us know that you've been keeping this ministry in prayer and your encouraging words. We really appreciate it, you all. Thank you. Because you know what we're up against. Not just this channel, but others as well. And to those who've been sending monetary support, thank you as well, particularly those doing it anonymously. We don't have a way to send a thank you email without your contact information. So just know that we appreciate you. So let's continue with our topic of, do you know what it means to be a Christian? We really have to start with the obvious, and that is that we're living in the times of the Gentiles. It's coming to an end, but we're still living in the times of the Gentiles. And based on Scripture, we know that they were not entrusted with the oracles of the Most High. That was Israel's assignment. The other thing that we often forget is that the same people who enslaved our ancestors taught us about the Bible. It's now coming to light that they gave the slaves Bible they had altered to keep them from learning certain truths. So we can't be naive in thinking that the oppressors who are in control of the major religions of the world didn't use it to maintain their power. The good news is that we're waking up to the truth, and as we seek to learn more about who we are, the Holy Spirit is giving us revelation to help us return to our rightful place. So take a look at this graph. You can see that it's clear that Christianity is the world's largest religion by population. And Europeans pat themselves on the back for that because they consider, that it was a feat how they transported Christianity around the world. But I guess we really have to start with this question. With Christianity being the major religion of the world, why is the world in such turmoil? And we can't give Islam, the second largest religion, a pass. Oftentimes, Christianity is attacked while the other religions are not. But when you look at this and see that Christianity make up the world's largest population, you would think that the world would be in much better shape. How can it be that the majority of people on the planet ascribe to the teachings of Messiah, and yet we see so much depravity in the world, to include in the churches? How can that be? Shouldn't people's hearts and behavior change when they receive the gospel? If there is no change, are we really hearing the message that Messiah came to bring. Take a look at these pie charts. You can see that Christians are in the blue areas and Muslims in the green. This gives us a clear picture of how the major religions are dominant in certain portions of the world. Look at the region controlled by Christianity in blue. These are mainly European Western countries. And on the continent of Africa, you see a lot of blue areas. And that tells us that Christianity grew as a result of colonial expansion. This can be said for Islam as well. There are some pockets of green there, but how did that happen? Both religions forced people to convert or die. And based on what you know about the Bible, do you see that strategy being used in the Old or New Testament? Did the disciples force people to receive Messiah? No. So where did that practice come from? Straight from Babylon. So we have to ask, is the Christian church really the church that Messiah built? Is Christianity really the religion of Christ, or has it been mixed with something else? Hard questions, I know, but let's keep going. So, as you're thinking about that, listen to this from this article called Christian Imperialism and the Transatlantic Slave Trade by Katie Cannon. She says the transatlantic slave trade in Africans was founded on Christianity. The slave trade was founded on this religion. She said religion was key in motivating Prince Henry of Portugal, later called Henry the Navigator, to put in motion Europe's aggressive and ruthless expeditions to Africa. So she talks about Henry being the administrator of the Order of Christ. She says he was the Portuguese successor to the Knights Templar, a famous Western military order founded in the aftermath of the First Crusade at Clermont on November 27, 1095. I'll drop down. It says, Henry trained men to sail from Portugal down the west coast of Africa in search of the limits to the Muslim world in order to halt the Islamization of West Africa and to accelerate the spread of Christianity. So, did they spread it by preaching the gospel, or were the people forced to convert to Christianity? And again, is this really the church that Christ built? Let's keep going with this. The article goes on to say, Henry the Navigator considered conversion and enslavement as interchangeable terms. They were one and the same, being converted and enslaved. It says, experiencing no cognitive dissonance in using Christianity as a civilizing agent for making converts into slaves. In other words, Christianity was supposed to make our people civilized. It says, in Christianity, missionaries in Africa, Madupe Labode sums it up this way. The case of the Portuguese exemplifies the close relationship between the crown and the church. It says, I'll drop down, the vast majority of the missionaries at this time were Roman Catholic priests. Many of them belonged to religious orders such as the Jesuits, Capuchins, and Franciscans. All right, so I have another article. This is from the BBC, Religions, Christianity, Atlantic Slave Trade, and Abolition. And this one says, historical records show that Islam and Christianity played an important role in enslavement in Africa. The Arab-controlled trans-Saharan slave trade helped to institutionalize slave trading on the continent. And during the Age of Expedition, European Christians witnessed caravans loaded with Africans en route to the Middle East. Others arriving much later in West Africa observed slavery in African societies, leading them to assume that African enslavement was intrinsic to the continent. Listen to this. For many of these early European explorers, the Bible was not only regarded as infallible, it was also their primary reference tool, and those looking for answers to explain differences in ethnicity, culture, and slavery found them in Genesis 9:24-27. So this is the verse they used to justify what they were doing. The curse of Ham, if you remember, that was used to say, well, these people are cursed. So yes, we have the right to do this to them. I'll drop down. It says, in time, the connection Europeans made between sin, slavery, skin color, and beliefs would condemn Africans. In the Bible, physical or spiritual slavery is often a consequence of sinful actions, while darkness is associated with evil. Moreover, the Africans, and we know they did not enslave all Africans. They enslaved our people, primarily those who were in West Africa. It says, moreover, the Africans were subsequently considered heathens, bereft of Christianity, although scholars now suggest that Christianity reached Africa as early as the 2nd century AD. Imagine that. And that the Christian communities in North Africa were among the first in the world. However, Europeans doubtlessly refused to acknowledge the relevance of African Christianity as it appeared irreconcilable with the continent's cultural surroundings. So they took a look at things, happening, the way that they lived, their culture, and it didn't line up with what they assumed Christianity should look like. So, they're heathens. We have a right to enslave them. Let's keep going. All right, it goes on because they're using religion as a justification. It says the emergence of colonies in the Americas and the need to find laborers saw Europeans turn their attention to Africa, with some arguing that the transatlantic slave trade would enable Africans, especially the Mohammedans, to come into contact with Christianity and civilization in the Americas, albeit as slaves. So think about what our ancestors saw these so-called Christians doing, raping the women, the men, the children, saw them cutting open the bellies of pregnant women, letting the babies fall out. They saw them using babies as alligator bait. But they were civilized. They were civilized. They were civilized Christians. Do you really know what it means to be a Christian? All right, let's keep going. It says religion was also a driving force during slavery in the Americas. Once they arrived at their new locales, the enslaved Africans were subjected to various processes to make them more compliant. This is what Christianity did for our people. It made us more accepting of the brutality and the horrors, because they said, well, you'll get yours in the sweet by and by. You just need to be a good Christian, like the good book says. All right, let's keep going. Ironically, although the assertion of evangelization was one of the justifications for enslaving Africans, very little missionary work actually took place during the early years. In short, religion got in the way of a money-making venture by taking Africans away from their work. So what was it really about, you all? What was it really about? Let's go down to the last section. However, some clergy tried to push the idea that it was possible to be a good slave and Christian. and pointed to St. Paul's epistles, which call for slaves to obey their masters, and St. Peter's letters, which appear to suggest that it was wholly commendable for Christian slaves to suffer at the hands of cruel masters. Then why didn't they treat other people groups the same way? Why didn't they force them into slavery? Let's keep going. So where did the Christian name really come from? And I'll read some excerpts from some passages. I won't really cover this topic in detail because some of our other Hebrew brothers and sisters have already done a lot of teaching about the true meaning of this word Christian, that it was initially a derogatory term that the pagans called the early believers. And it's similar to how they use or the N-word, or how they call us the N-word today. And we also know that the word was added, much like how they added the word Easter and how they changed the Hebrew names to European names. So let's read some of this. This is from Relevant Magazine. It says, Christian, few words in the English language carry as much baggage as this one. It's a loaded label, to be sure, but what's interesting is that Jesus, or Messiah, never actually gave a name to his followers. The early church never called themselves Christians. In the Bible, the title most often used was saints. We also see them referred to as people of the way or believers. But this article goes on to say the Greek word for saints is hagios, which means consecrated to God, holy, sacred, pious. It is almost always used in the plural, saints. This reflects not just the individual, but the connection to a group of people set apart for the Lord and his kingdom. This article from Aletheia is saying the same thing. Christians were not always called Christians. So let's read some excerpts from this. All right, it says Christians were not always Christians. That is, the members of the early church didn't refer to themselves as Christians. So where did this name come from? When we look at the texts that make up the New Testament, we find early communities would rather call themselves saints, if anything. It should be noticed, though, that in the original Greek, the word saint, or hagios, has slightly different connotations than it might have for us nowadays in either English or any other language. The Greek hagios in this particular context simply means consecrated to God. The fact that the word always appears in the plural in the New Testament reveals the early church considered itself a community of people working and living together in the service of God. I also wanted to share some excerpts from this article because I think it will benefit you to know this information for those who may not have known. It says why Christians were denied access to their Bible for 1,000 years. It says, wouldn't you assume that the newly established church would want its devotees to immerse themselves in the sanctioned New Testament, especially since the church went to great lengths to eliminate competing gospels? You would think. But no, the Catholic Church banned the Bible from the early converts for 1,000 years. Why would they do that? Let's read on and see. They made certain decrees. They had the decree of the Council of Toulouse. It says, we prohibit also that the laity should be permitted to have the books of the Old or New Testament, but we most strictly forbid their having any translation of these books. Then they had the ruling of the Council of Tarragona. No one may possess the books of the Old and New Testaments in the Romance language, and if anyone possessed them, he must turn them over to the local bishop within 8 days after promulgation of this decree. so that they may be burned. I guess if the people were reading on their own, they would see that the word Christian wasn't in there, or that the European names were not originally in the Bible. They didn't have Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, that they had Hebrew names. Maybe they didn't want them to see that. Okay, they also had the proclamations at the Ecumenical Council of Constance, and in this one, they had John Wycliffe. He translated the New Testament into English, and they killed him. And the same thing happened to William Tyndale in 1536 CE. They killed him. He was burned at the stake for translating the Bible so that people could read it in their own language. The Catholic Church did this. Let's keep going. So the author goes on to say, while I was writing my book, Jesus Uncensored, Restoring the Authentic Jew, it became increasingly clear to me that there was another more potent motive for keeping the New Testament out of reach for Christians, to conceal the Jewish foundation of Christianity and Jesus' lifelong dedication to Judaism and Jewish practices. We can also add that his name wasn't Jesus and that they were called Yehudi. But let's keep going. Would the newly established church want converts to know that Christianity began as a Jewish sect and that Jesus was a thoroughly dedicated practicing Jew who never suggested the launch of a new religion? Would the church want it revealed that Jesus lived and died as a dedicated Jew, as observed by Christian writer John Guitton in his book Great Heresies and Church Councils? So here's a quote from his book. He said, Jesus did not mean to found a new religion. In his historical humanity, Jesus was a devout Israelite practicing the law to the full from circumcision to Pesach, paying the half shekel for the temple. Jerusalem, the capital of his nation, was the city he loved. Jesus wept over it. Jesus had spiritually realized the germinal aspiration of his people, which was to raise the God of Israel. All right, let's keep going. He goes on to say, if Christians had access to the Bible in its entirety, not only the limited editions that the clergy presented, they might have noticed what leaped out at me. The word Jew appears 202 times in the New Testament, with 82 of those citations in the Gospels. The term Christian never appears in the Gospels at all, for the obvious reason that there was no Christianity during the life of Jesus, only Judaism, in which he and his family, disciples, and followers were immersed. Readers of the Gospels might also have noted that when Jesus wasn't addressing the multitudes of Jews, he was teaching in synagogues and was attending Jewish holy day celebrations, and his disciples called him rabbi. Since the gospel writers couldn't keep Judaism out of Jesus' life story and ministry, without the Judaism there would be no story. They invoked the ban on the Bible while Christianizing Jesus with selective and edited stories that they conveyed to the public. He goes on. The Christianizing process, along with the erasing Jesus' Jewish identity, like changing him from a black man to a white man with blonde hair and blue eyes, continued throughout the medieval and Renaissance periods. It is dramatically illustrated in classical artworks, in which Jesus and his family show no trace of a connection to Judaism. In this ethnic cleansing of Judaism, they are pictured as fair-skinned northern Europeans living in palatial, Romanesque settings surrounded by latter-day Christian saints and Christian artifacts and practices, images completely alien to their actual Jewish lives in a rural village in Galilee. So we're going to take a look at this book called Who Are Christians? It's a discourse. And I want to highlight some things from this book. Right, it says if Christianity, as taught in our evangelical churches, is true, the most important question that one man can ask another is, are you a Christian? Next to this, in importance, must be the question, what constitutes a Christian? Noah Webster says that a Christian is one who believes in Christ and especially one whose inward and outward life is conformed to the doctrines of Christ. So let's look at some who were considered to be Christians. Constantine the Great was a Christian. He who murdered his son Crispus and his nephew Licinius and suffocated his wife Faustus in a bath. He may be regarded indeed as the founder of our present Christian Sabbath. Theodosius I, another Roman emperor, who murdered in cold blood 7,000 of the inhabitants of Thessalonica without distinction of age, was a zealous and orthodox Christian, and so was Leo III, who commanded every person in his dominions to be baptized under pain of banishment, and sentenced those to death who relapsed into idolatry after the ceremony. It gets worse. It says the Jews were driven into their synagogues and burned. You know they're talking about our people, right? And nearly 70,000 persons were massacred. Father Dominic, who founded the Spanish Inquisition, was a Christian, and so were the wretches who applied its tortures. Again, most of those who were being tortured were our people. It goes on. Torquemada, during his tenure of office as Inquisitor General, burned thousands, most of them fellow Christians, who differed from him on some unimportant trifles. In less than 300 years, the Spanish and Christian Inquisition burned alive more than 30,000 persons and condemned to various terms of imprisonment nearly 300,000. Now I ask you, is this the religion that Christ founded? Is this the behavior of the disciples and the apostles? So, do you really know what it means when you say you are a Christian? Are you identifying with this? Let's keep going. So, you all remember Leopold, King Leopold, in the Congo, all of the atrocities in the Congo. In the 19th century, colonialism was widely seen as an opportunity for missionary activity. Colonists and missionaries established symbolic relationships to further both their interests. Of the Europeans who scrambled for control of Africa at the end of the 19th century, Belgium's King Leopold II left arguably the most notable legacy. It says, while the great powers competed for territory elsewhere, the King of Belgium carved his own private colony out of 100 kilometers of Central African rainforest. The state existed from 1885 to 1908 and included the area of the present Democratic Republic of the Congo. The king's stated motivation was, listen to this, to open the heart of Africa to Christian missionaries and Western capitalists, and to protect the natives from Arab slavers. And of course, you know this group who terrorized our people for decades were considered Christian, right? Says KKK leader, we're a Christian organization, claims the Klan is not a hate group. Do you really know what it means to be a Christian? We'll keep going. I'll wrap it up by sharing some excerpts from this article from Beyond Today called Constantine's Impact on Christianity. Okay, it says Constantine's reign as Roman emperor from AD 306 to 337 dramatically changed the direction of Christianity, though in ways far different from those portrayed in the Da Vinci Code. This grew out of his strategy for unifying his empire by creating a Catholic, meaning universal church, that would blend elements from many religions into one. While Constantine supposedly converted to Christianity in 312, he wasn't baptized until on his deathbed 25 years later. In the intervening years, he had his wife and eldest son murdered, and from all appearances he continued as a worshiper of the sun god. Long after his supposed conversion, he had coins minted with a portrait of himself on one side and a depiction of his companion, the unconquered soul or sun, on the other. So if you research this history, you will find that he adopted Christianity as a political move to unify the Roman Empire. But he used religion as a tool of control, much like how Europeans used it to enslave our people. The Roman Catholic Church also burned Bibles and other religious texts to prevent people from questioning their pagan doctrine. And they forced this religion on people around the world. Those who resisted were tortured and killed. So the truth is that Christianity is one of the bloodiest religions of all time. And in the Old Testament, you'll find that pagans forced people to fall down and worship their God or die. This is not the way of the Most High. He gave us a right to choose. So again, you have to ask yourself, is this how the apostles behaved when they preached the gospel? Did they force it on people? Also consider it was the Roman Catholic Church that changed the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, and the feast days set up by the Most High to pagan holidays so they could honor the sun god. Now add all the atrocities of the slave trade to all of this, and they are called Christians. So when you square that up with everything else you heard, you can hopefully see that Christianity is a religion like the other religions of the world. Messiah did not come to bring us a religion. So I know I've shared some information, that was hard to hear, but hopefully it will help you to decide if that's what you want to call yourself. I want you to know what it really means to be a Christian. Shalom, everyone.